Okay. So as a developer, if you're thinking about how can I use my technical skills to build something that can potentially be used by millions of sellers and in the process monetize my efforts, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the eBay APIs 101. Neil Mansilla has been our star developer and has created many applications that have been successfully used by our sellers. I'm Rekha Patel. I manage the developer technical support team, and I help developers who have questions on the eBay APIs. So in this session, we're going to answer 3 major questions for you. What is it that you can do with the eBay APIs? And then we'll get into the question of how can you use the eBay APIs? And the third most important question, what is in it for me to build applications? What am I going to get out of it? And Neil is going to help us bring some insights into that question. And then we'll show you what are the next steps to help you get started. With that, we'll open up the floor for question and answers. So ready to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
So to me, the eBay APIs are like Lego blocks. You can take your blocks, assemble them differently, and now you have a unique application that can solve use cases for specific users. If you were to look at the functionality that you can build, they fall into 4 major categories. The first is you can help sellers bring their inventory to eBay. You can help them manage their inventory, list items, price them, and change their quantity on the fly. The second major category is the post-sales transaction management. So once a seller has their inventory on eBay, you can help them manage their sales information. You can help them download their orders, manage their feedback, and in some unfortunate cases, if there are any disputes between the buyers and sellers, you can help with the intermediation process. You can use the eBay APIs to manage the communication between the buyers and sellers. And then once the business has started on eBay, you can help your sellers scale on eBay. You can help them find out what are the areas that they can be a little more efficient. For example, you can help them analyze their feedback and find out that what are the areas that may need some tweaking on the seller's side to help them perform better on eBay. Or you can help them analyze their items, how they're doing in terms of search versus the competition, and give them suggestions or strategies on how they can improve their search rankings and therefore better conversion. The fourth major category is on the buy side. You can create rich, tailored shopping experiences for buyers that may have a very specific way of, let's say, finding items or going through the purchase flow. So you can help create those experiences for buyers. And all that you need in terms of technology is to be able to make an HTTP request, send a payload, and parse the response. That's pretty much all that it takes to make use of the eBay APIs. With that, you can bring the experiences to where your customers are, whether they are on mobile devices, on desktops, web applications, widgets, gadgets, plugins, you name it all. So this is essentially what you can do with the eBay APIs. If you're familiar with the site, you can build pretty much most of the functionality that you see on the site with eBay APIs. So that takes us to the question on what do you want to build today, and Neil is going to show us one of the applications that he's built, used by many sellers very successfully.
Oh, thank you. So as Rekha said, I'm an eBay third-party developer. How many of you guys actually have an eBay developer key and build something? Oh, awesome. Just very few of you. So I've been doing startups on the net for since 1994, and one of the things that I also did in the past was I sold things on eBay. My wife and I sold a whole lot of stuff. And so managing the seller efficiency part that Rekha was talking about is very important. So one of the things that we were doing like 5-6 years ago is traveling all around the U.S. We wanted to stay connected with our eBay activity. So imagine if I miss out on a question. We sold industrial equipment. And I don't answer that question, they're going to go somewhere else. And even if it costs $1,000 more, because that's the type of market we're in. These guys need to know it's going to be, Next Day or Sonic Air. They need it. And so I built this app just for us internally, and this is like 6 years ago, well, maybe not that long ago. and loved it so much that we actually gave it away to some of our friends. And it got to the point where I just made it an app and let more people just use it for free. It got to the point where I think we were blowing out about, probably 150,000 text messages a month. And it kind of started had a lot of diminishing returns. So I decided to make it a subscription-based app. And it's like $3.95 a month, and there's thousands of people that actually use this thing. Actually, there's a lesson inside this thing, too, in terms of how you run it. So this was one of the things that I developed that's public-facing. I've also developed a lot of apps that are just privately used amongst like very high volume or high dollar sellers. How many of you that did not raise your hands are actually entrepreneurs that have other businesses? Any of you? Okay. Well, that's all I've known is how to be an entrepreneur, and there's very few platforms out there that have as many opportunities as this, because these are all small and medium business people that are willing to spend money in order to make their lives easier, and I was one of them. So I remember just several years ago, I would actually pay one of the certified providers who did my listing and picture management. I was blowing out $450 a month, and I didn't even think twice about it, because to do that by hand would have been ridiculous. But imagine if they had, and I'm sure they did have, thousands of customers like me that paid pretty steep prices, right? It's a huge departure from the 99-cent one download app, revenue stream. This is a lot of monthly recurring revenue inside this platform. So this is one. I guess this app here is something that notified me whenever I had a question, whenever I had a sale, a best offer. It just kept me connected, so that I didn't feel like I'd have to come home from traveling or come home from from whatever I was doing now with my kids and not be connected. So whenever, let's say I received a question for something that was only worth $400, I get a text message to my phone. Now, a lot of people use the smartphone devices now, but you would not believe how many people still subscribe to this thing because they have the Star Trek communicator flip phones. So this really addresses a need. But this is just one example of the things that I've done on the eBay platform. Anyhow, that's our text.
Yeah, and it's amazing how people continue to develop on the eBay platform and come up with really innovative ideas. Just a few months back, we had the university hackathon, and one of the students came up with the idea of blow your paycheck. And the idea was pretty interesting. It would take a user's profile, apply some personalization to it, and then it would also capture the dollar amount that the student made on a weekly basis by doing odd jobs. It would go out to eBay, find an ensemble of items that might interest the student and present it to the student, and some of them ended up buying those items. So it's pretty amazing how people come up with new ideas and new ways to solve problems. And I'm hoping one of the days somebody will come up with the idea of how to stretch your paycheck.
Yeah. So you had mentioned real quick that there's buy-side and sell-side monetization opportunities. I primarily focused on the sell-side, but I also built apps for myself to be a power buyer on eBay, to find things that were really low priced for me. It's still more of a seller application, but it was, in terms of APIs, it was very buy-centric. I used every single search API I can get my hands on. So maybe we'll talk about the eBay Partner Network after this as well.
Sure. So let's get into the question of how. How do you start using the eBay APIs? So the first thing that you need to do is to go to our newly launched site, x.com, and look for the eBay Developer Network. Once you're there, you click on the eBay Developer account, and it'll take you to a page that you can use for joining the program. It's free, takes just a couple of minutes to sign in. We ask for very minimal information. You create your account, tell us who you are, and sign up for the program. Once you're in, the next thing that you do is to generate your key set. So this is essentially the keys to the kingdom of eBay APIs. And you'll notice that there are two environments that we have, Sandbox and Production. eBay offers a test environment to its developers where you can test your applications. It's essentially like taking a car and test driving it. So it's a simulator. Offers most of the functionality that you need for inventory and order management. So you definitely want to leverage this, because this gives you the opportunity to try out all the scenarios, all the use cases that you're solving for without incurring any listing fees or without the obligation of fulfilling if somebody ended up purchasing your items. So a great tool for developers. Definitely leverage it, use it.
It's kind of fun to actually look at other people's Sandbox listings and start bidding on them just for fun. So I know it's probably not the nicest thing to do, but it's a blast to see what people launch on there.
Yeah, and if you end up winning it, you don't have to pay for it.
You don't have to pay for it. Yeah, it's like faux gambling.
And once you've got your application working to the state that you think you're comfortable with, you can take it live in production. And you'll notice that the key sets are different. Sandbox and production are totally separate environments. They're isolated. None of the users or key sets in Sandbox work in production and vice versa. This is to help keep things secure and tight. So,
just a quick question. Does everyone know who here is a developer? Okay, good, majority of you. So the ones that didn't raise your hands, like when Reka called this the keys of the kingdom, those little access keys there are like passwords. And those are what are required to actually make API calls into the back end and do things like list items, answer questions, get bid notifications, and all that stuff. You need that authentication information, just if it wasn't clear to any of you.
All right, so once you've got your keys, the next thing that you want to do is to figure out which APIs would you use. So once you have your use case in mind, you can go to our documentation page, and you'll see a very comprehensive list of APIs that we have. The trading API, this is the most popular or the most used APIs used for inventory and order management. And then next in line we have is the finding API used for building search experiences. And then complementing that is the shopping APIs, large merchant services, Open eBay apps, and so on. So you can click into the documentation that we have. It's very comprehensive, very detailed. Gives you general information on what the API does, what are the use cases that you can use this for. Gives you technical information on what is it that you need to make the API calls. So for all the developers here, the supported formats, whether it supports XML, SOAP, JSON, name value pairs, and so on. The kind of headers that you need to pass in your request. And then you can get into the detailed information of each call. So for instance, if I clicked on Find Items Advanced, it gives me general information about the call. And then I can click on Input, gives me all the detailed parameters that I can pass into the item or the call. So let's say if I clicked on what does aspect filters do, it gives me information on that. Similarly, I have detailed information about outputs, detailed control. So this section tells you what information is returned to you when you make the call. And my favorite section, samples. I'm sure you guys will like it as well. Whenever I'm building something, I generally start off with a sample, try it out, and then read up on it. So if you're like me, this is what you're going to like the best. And then we have change history. So this gives you information on all the new features that we introduce and what is it that you can take advantage of. So once you've decided what API or APIs you want to use, you can essentially create a mashup. You can use one or more products. You can take a test drive using our API test tool. This is a tool that's available on the site. So before you can even start writing code, you can try out your calls and get a feel of what it takes to make the call, what is it that you're going to get back in your response. And here you'll notice that we have two environments, Sandbox and production. Now if I were to build a search experience, I can go against production directly because I'm not really writing any information. I'm not going to be liable for anything that I read. So I'd choose production, and it automatically populates my production key set. And then I can select from a list of API calls that I have. Let's see. I guess we are running into some technical glitches here.
You're the trading API.
Or I can, yeah. There we go. So this is a hello world type of call, get eBay official time. All that it does is returns the timestamp on our servers. Yeah, I think I'm having some problems here. Let's try this again.
This test tool has actually evolved quite a bit. When I first started working on the eBay platform, the documentation was super, super helpful, but as soon as they launched this thing, it's a way to, it's time to first hello world, as I think Chris Messina coined that. It's really quick. You know, you can get in there and actually start making calls and poking around, and you'll find it very, very useful. And obviously it's prettified too. It's all color-coded and easy to read right there.
And we also have a list of templates that you can choose from. So let's say if you wanted to make the find items advanced call, it gives you a template. And then you can choose your version. When you're building your application, you always want to start with the latest version, which at the moment is 1.11.0. And then the next most important thing that you want to keep in mind is the site against which you're making your request. eBay has multiple sites that are specific to countries and regions. Like we have a site for US, Canada, UK, Germany, France, and so on. And the site that you make the request to controls the information that you get back. So if you were to make a search call against US, the results may be dramatically different from what it might be for UK. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind. And based on what I selected, it constructs the endpoint. So this is where my request is going to get routed to. These are the headers. You'll notice that it has my app ID in here, the version, the site to which I'm making the request, eBay US, and this is my request payload. I hit submit. And if my call is successful, in my response I get this element called ACK with a value of success. If it doesn't succeed, then I get back a failure and it'll tell me why it failed. So it's a great way of finding out what's wrong and how you can fix it. So here are my items that meet the criteria that I sent in my input.
There's also a WSDL, if you guys know what SOAP and XML is, where you can actually import the WSDL into a tool like SOAP UI. And that's kind of my preferred tool for getting down and dirty. But here, this is a very lightweight version to do essentially the same thing.
So a question to you. If you wanted to list an item, if you wanted to try it out, what environment would you use? Anybody?
I work with a nonprofit special interest library that has donations that it cannot use in the library, so it's interested in possibly selling the more unique items on eBay. And so one of the things that you cannot do with Amazon is Amazon only lists current items, but if it's something that is no longer in stock, which sometimes we have, I would love to be able to go to eBay and see what the price it has ever sold for.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one. Yeah. On that note, in terms of what developers have done to address that, there's companies like Terapeak out there, and they are the leaders in terms of price history on eBay. And you can actually you can download, you can go to terapeak.com. You can come up after this, and I'll give you the URL. And it has the most comprehensive price history, and you can search by keyword, I believe by ISBN, and you can get like a moving history and see like, this is the average strike price. This is the best day that it sells. More information you could possibly want. The biggest thing for you would be like, well, what should I price this thing at, right?
Well, we're mostly interested in knowing if it's worth selling, because we don't sell anything for less than $20.
That is the exact app.
Right.
Now that, just so you know, was built using eBay APIs. Now Terapeak has taken it to an extraordinary level of like.
Well, I've had to learn how to do it myself.
Well, you could. Sure. You can search eBay, and there's what are called completed listings. You can search that, right?
Right. So in the Finding API, we've added a new call called Find Completed Items, where you can specify your title or any other keywords that you think describes the item. and you get a list of all the items that sold in the past and what are the prices that they sold at. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So the question was, if I wanted to find what prices an item sold for on eBay, how would I do it? And the answer is to use the finding API. It has a call that gives you a list of items that sold and what prices it sold at. And that's what Terapeak uses to create their historical information.
Sure.
So if you wanted to list an item and if you wanted to do the testing, you would use the Sandbox. So in this case, I'll select Sandbox. And from my drop-down, I'll select Trading API. That's what I use for managing my inventory and orders on eBay. And now you'll notice that it has created this section called Select a User Token. So whenever you're managing inventory or getting orders or getting information that's specific to a user, you're actually making calls on behalf of a user. And that's what the user token there represents. It represents the authorization of a user to a specific application to make calls on their behalf. So they're giving you the permission to make the calls. So the idea here is to separate the user and the application as two different entities. And that gives you the ability to service multiple sellers with the same application. You swap out the token, use the same application, and now you're servicing multiple clients.
Very similar, I guess, in most use cases, you guys might use a Foursquare or a Twitter or a Facebook app, and they send you back to Facebook first to authenticate. Same thing happens with eBay, right? If I create my eBay selling or buying application, and it says it's web-based or mobile-based, I actually have to auth their account first. So we'll send them off to eBay, let them enter in the credentials. Never gets shared with the developer. All we developers get is a token, and that like Rika said, we can do all of these, we can actually access their account by listing and searching and so on and so forth, and answering questions.
And now that I've selected the trading API and I'm going against the Sandbox, you'll see that the URL has changed. And in here I have Sandbox, so that kind of tells you that this request is being routed to Sandbox. The headers change depending on the API that I make. And here is my body. The XML payload contains information about the item, the title, the shipping services, the price that you want to sell, the payment methods that you'll accept, your return policy, and so on. And in here is the user token. So you're making calls on behalf of this user called DTS2. You submit your request. And again, if the request is successful, I'll get back an ACK with a value of success. And in this case, I get back an item ID. So I can actually take this and go to our Sandbox environment. The URL is www.sandbox.ebay.com. I paste in the item ID. And now I can see what it looks like on the site. So if you're creating any listing templates or anything else that you want to test, you can do that here. Now you can bid, or if you list a fixed price item, you can buy it and go through the whole order management process. All right, so let's take a look at some of the concepts that we covered. So the first one was user tokens. Again, not all API calls require user tokens. It's only if you're getting information that's specific to a user, that's private to a user. Those APIs require user tokens. Others just require an app ID. In the case of the finding API, the demo that I did, you just needed your app ID. You didn't need any user tokens. And for trading API, you needed user tokens. User tokens do have an expiration date. They're valid for 18 months. So that's something that you want to keep build a reminder and ensure that you do the renewal of user tokens before they expire so that your users can continue to use the application seamlessly. Second, date time is always in UTC. Very simple concept, but we've seen many developers trip over this. For instance, let's say if I wanted to get all my orders between 12 noon and 1 p.m., and if I was on the Pacific Coast, that actually converts to 7 p.m. UTC and 8 p.m. UTC. So you need to make sure that you're doing the conversion correctly to make sure that you get all the information that you're looking for. The functionality of the API call depends on a number of factors. One, to what site you're making the call against. Like I mentioned, the results can be very, very different depending on the site to which you're routing your request. It depends on whose behalf you're making the call. Some users may have more privileges than the other users. So that's the other thing that you need to keep in mind. The API call itself, how you're making the call, whether you're sending it, whether you're asking for more information or less information depends on the detail that you're passing in. And the APIs also offer a lot of flexibility and functionality in terms of filters and pagination. So you can get just the information that you're looking for.
It's really important if you guys are building mobile apps, because you imagine an XML payload, the response, could be enormous. And you can actually use the filters to trim down only to the fields that you want, and then use pagination to say maximum number of results to page 1, right? Because if you only have the form factor on your screen to only fit 2 items, why would you want to pull a payload of 50 or 100 items at one time? So that's pretty useful.
And then just a reminder that Sandbox and production are totally different environments. Your key set, your user tokens, your server URLs are not shared, they're different. So if anytime you're making your request and you come back with an error message saying that the user token is invalid or the app ID is invalid, check your server URL. Next, some things that you want to think about when you're designing and building your application. How many of us here write code without any bugs? Okay, I'd like to chat with you after this session. It's not because we are bad programmers or we don't have good logic in our code. It's just because our customers are very innovative and they come up with very different use cases that you've written your application for. So what that translates into in terms of the eBay API request is that your underlying XML is incorrect. And the best way to figure out what's going on or what's going wrong is to log your requests and responses. So what you see downstream is going to determine or is going to help you what went wrong upstream. And also it's a great tool for audit purposes. This is especially if you're helping sellers do their inventory and order management.
Mm-hmm. And it's super easy. If you guys are SQL, if you guys use like MySQL or any type of database, it's all super compressible stuff. And every single request and payload response we record and keep for at least a few months.
Right. And in eBay parlance, there are 2 types of errors. One is the request error. It's because we sent an XML that ended up being incorrect. And the other type of errors are eBay server errors. They are rare, but they do happen. Life is not perfect. So we want to make sure that our applications are robust, and anytime you run into server errors, make sure you retry for a couple of times so that your application can recover from those errors. We do have monitoring systems in place to help make sure that our servers are functioning and working as expected, but there can be those occasional instances where we may not catch it. So it's something for you to think about and build in your application. Next, let's talk a little bit about optimization. So when you go through the documentation, you'll see that for a specific functionality, that you can probably use more than one API. And when it comes time to choose between APIs, the choice that you want to make is to go with the one that is lighter in nature. So anything that does not require a user token is definitely going to be much lighter because you don't have all the heavyweight authentication going on in the background to ensure that the user has actually given you permission to make calls on your behalf and so on. So anytime you need to make a choice between 2 APIs, choose the one that gives you just the information that you're looking for and requires lesser authentication.
So in the trading API, that would be like the get listing.
Get item versus the shopping API, get single item. Go with the shopping API.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was creating background processes. This is again for people who are going to create applications for inventory and order management, where the operations can be very intensive. To be able to list an item on eBay, you need to know several things, like you need to know the eBay category structure. eBay has close to 30,000 categories, so downloading the categories can be an intensive operation. Similarly, if you're doing order management and if you're servicing high volume sellers, the number of orders that come down the pipe can be significantly high. So what you want to do is create background processes that do that on a periodic basis, and now when users are interacting with your application, they don't get stuck into that loop. So Neil, you've been there, you've done that. What else would you advise our developers?
Sure. Do I have notes? Yeah. So from my perspective, everything that Rekha said is super important. And here's one of the things I want to talk about is an asynchronous API. So you guys all realize that things are getting very real time, right? An SMS is real time. You get an email notification, it's real time. What Autex, my app, does is try to simulate real time. And how I do that is by using platform notifications. It's an event-triggered thing. So you saw in the app, you can actually subscribe to, hey, did I get a bid on something? Did I sell something, right? There's also buy-side events, too, you can subscribe to. This is probably one of the most powerful, well, for me, I should say, my perspective is I think this is one of the most powerful things that you need to look into, is the any type of evented API like this, or, it calls a webhook, for anyone who knows what that is, right? So for this particular event, I wanted to go to this URL and tell me something happened. Just wrap your head around that. It's super, super useful. I'm not constantly polling eBay and saying, hey, did my customer sell something today? Or did he sell something just now? And then 5 seconds later is now. I don't have to do that, right? Without this, you'd have to do something like that. So imagine any event, even a revise item, canceled item, item 1, item lost. The list is huge. If you just go and look at the platform notifications API, you'd do yourself a really good service there. So how many of you have actually built things asynchronous, like with queues? Right? Yeah, you got the developer with the beard. Of course he does. So basically, with eBay, you don't know the type of seller or the type of eBay user you're going to be getting that subscribes to your app. It could be the person that sells 7 Hallmark cards in a month. It could be the guy that sells 20,000 iPod cases a day. And the thing is that your app can't discriminate. It doesn't know. So you might think that you're just going for the mom and pop shops, but that's just not always the case. And I discovered this the hard way. I did not architect my app initially to deal with a spike, let's say. It's 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and there's just tons of activity, of course, because I subscribed all of my users to every single platform notification, like completely against what Rekha was saying, is only ask for what you need. Went the opposite way. So, of course, back to her point, you only want to ask for the information you need. But to my point about scale, you can't necessarily handle things as events take place. So I queue everything. So as events take place, like literally in 1 second, there could be 80 events. I'm not going to shoot off 80 emails or 80 text messages that very second. I couldn't handle it. So I put them in a message queue, right? Serialized numbers. And then I have a whole bunch of workers that will query that queue, and as the resources are available, they'll send out the messages or send out the notifications. It might be able to handle 80 concurrent, but what if it was 160 concurrent, right? So if you just can kind of level it out with a queue-based thought process, there's a lot of different types of queue systems out there that you can utilize that are open source, or you can code your own. It's really simple. The idea, though, is that don't try to do everything at that very moment, because you don't know how much traffic you're going to have to deal with at any given second. It could be a ton, particularly with eBay. And that, to the second bullet point there, that's really what really brought my app to its knees. So 99% of my users are mom and pop shops. 1% of them are these killers that I literally like to drop them as customers because they're just eating all my resources, right? But you have to prepare for that. So just something to think of. This is another thing, too. Being an entrepreneur, I often joke with my friends that I can build a business off one API call. And I love. So right now I work for a company called Mashery. All I do is evangelize our clients' APIs. And what I love doing is just going through the most obscure methods to see, like, what could I do with this thing, right? I mean, these are opportunities waiting to happen. eBay is full of them. You can't look at them just, I'm going to list an item and I'm going to get an item, right? There's so much more in there, so many nuances, because there's so much activity. And you got to just, again, behave yourself. It would be really good if you just go in there and look at the APIs. They're not all the same, and the methods have gems. I have so many eBay businesses queued up in my head that I have not acted upon. And again, with tons of potential monthly recurring revenue. So look, and I didn't get these ideas out of thin air. I actually did that by traversing the docs. So the docs also are fantastic. Again, I'm in the API business now, and I see what the majority of docs look like out there, and they're just trying to catch up with something as comprehensive as eBay has in terms of, like you were saying, the samples, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, code samples, beautiful, right? But even their technical support, top notch. This is like everything you ever wanted in an API, they've thought of it. So if you are thinking of building on something there, you're very, very well supported if in the automated sense with docs, if you need extra help with developer technical support. And I do love them, as you can see. Yeah. The APIs.
So we're going to pick your brain a little bit.
Sure.
And we're going to ask you to answer the most important question. What is in it for them?
So I won't get into, real quick, trust and safety.
Sure.
Protect your tokens, encrypt your data. It's really easy to do, right? There's tons of tools to take your data. You think, I'll just take this token or let's store it in this database. It's so easy to root servers these days or break into stuff. I mean, you see it every day with these guys from all these different little security hacking groups. Just encrypt the stuff and treat it like you want your account to be treated. And because if someone were to compromise a key, they could do some pretty silly things with it, right? Like list a whole boatload of items or bid stuff on their behalf. We'll protect from that. So it's an important thing. We're at 36. So opportunities. Did I have anything in here? Buyer-focused apps. So eBay does have an affiliate program called the eBay Partner Network where they reward you for traffic, for quality traffic. And I don't know much about it. I have not actually built. That's untrue. I did build something on the EPN in the past. But apparently I read that there's a new mobile SDK for the EPN. But for me, buy-side optimization, apps that help people buy things efficiently, not necessarily just random traffic, but like very specific things. And I built those for myself, right? So I was able to identify listings where not just misspellings, right? Misspelled listings, but just listings where people maybe they just didn't exactly know what they were listing, right? And I'd actually track those types of people that listed that stuff, and I'd buy it. And that's something like my best example. I remember buying something, this is no joke. I bought something for $15 and I flipped it for about $1,800 because they just did not list it properly. And I happen to know who the seller was too, right? I mean, later on, I figured out, wow, this person's a treasure trove of goodness. And so just by monitoring things like that, buy-side optimizations are awesome. Seller-focused apps I love because small, medium business sellers, I mean, they spend money. Like I told you earlier, I spend $400 a month on my listing management thing. Customer service is huge. Anyone that sells $10,000, $20,000 a month, and once you kind of hit that level, you are getting swamped with emails and swamped with messages and questions. And optimizations around that are super, super, super worth paying for, right? I mean, people only pay me $3.95 a month for real-time stuff, for real-time SMSs to their phone. But in terms of having customer service tickets, a ticketing system so that people feel like they're being handled properly when they inquire with a question, that's still a hot app. And remember, nothing's particularly original. Before Autext, there was plenty of other people that tried to do SMS notifications too. I didn't invent this, right? I just am the guy that's making money from it, and the other people aren't. So even in this space, for process optimization, listing management, you think that, oh my gosh, it's swamped, right? There's always a way to do it better. There's always a vertical to focus on. And to my last point, the high dollar verticals, they rock. These people will definitely pay money to make their lives easier. Some of the people that I met in the past eBay lives, I mean, these are real. These are 6-person houses pulling in $350,000 a month, right? Their only concern is where are they going to vacation, or where can I, they're not all they want to do is save time. So are they going to pay for it? Heck yeah, they're going to pay for it. You said build an app for them. So I started doing that. I actually still interface with some seriously high dollar sellers, and they still use stuff that I coded for them years ago, right? And that's a good thing. There's a lot of opportunities when it comes to this platform. Honestly, yeah, you just have to dig in and understand. And by the way, I'm a seller, I'm a buyer, and obviously I'm a developer. Go through that process, right? Sell something. Sell, 10 items just to get a feel for it. Now, not trinkety things. Try to sell something with some value and understand what it takes and what the pains were, or how it could have been better. And then you build it. And if you build it and you market it well, people will subscribe to it.
Great. So in terms of next steps, after you signed up and you start building your application or you're thinking about what to build, one thing that you want to go through is the checklist that we have for going live. It has some very useful information on how you can make your application robust and scalable. To Neil's point, that you want to think about it up front rather than saying oops later on. And it also has some great information on secure coding practices. So definitely want to take a look at that. And you want to do an estimation of your call volumes, because by default you get 5,000 calls a day, and there is a process to get your call volumes increased. It's a very painless process. You have to file a request with us, tell us what you're doing, and we'll increase your call volumes. And then you also want, once you built your application, you're not really done. You want to keep revisiting your application at least once in 6 months, because eBay is constantly adding new features and functionality, and you definitely want to leverage that to stay ahead of the curve. So revisit your application once in 6 months. And the last reminder is that tokens, if your application uses user tokens, they do expire in 18 months. So you want to go through the token generation process before the tokens expire, so the lifetime increases by another 18 months. And go live and make money. Yes. So with that, we'll open up the floor to, we have some resource links here. You'll actually find it on x.com. And we'll open up to question and answers. Yes? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part. Yes, so the question was that the gentleman there at the back is using the finding APIs, and he's finding items based on the category IDs. So is there a place where he can find a list of all the categories? And yes, you can actually go to the ebay.com website, to the specific country site that you're interested in, and you'll find a list of categories. Or you can use the APIs. There's a call in the shopping API called get categories. You can use that, or you can use the trading API. So you can use either of them, either mechanism. So again, given a choice between using shopping and trading, you want to use shopping because it's lighter in weight.
Does anyone here actually sell on eBay as well? Yeah, it would be, honestly, for those of you that are interested in this at all, I'd really recommend just going through the process, right? Even if you did it several years ago, it might be different now. And you'll kind of answer your own questions about what can I build or what should I build. I have the luck of having a whole bunch of people send me emails every day saying, why don't you make it like this? Or why don't you build this? So they actually contribute to the ideas too. But there's also forums, right? There's on your developer, on developer.ebay.com, there's forums.
Right.
And people are constantly asking for types, features that are actually apps you could build to fix, to address those. And I often read, I would pay so much for that, which may or may not be true. But yeah, something to look at as a resource for ideas. Yes, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, the question was, are people open sourcing some of these apps? I haven't, just purely out of competitive nature, right? I mean, I wouldn't want someone just to do exactly what I do. I mean, at the end of the day, though, it's pretty easy to disassemble what people are doing, right? Maybe a little tougher to see what Terapeak does, because they do it, it's a business deal, that's gobs of data stretched over years and years. And whereas mine is pretty simple to dissect, right? It's platform notifications, and I use some secret sauce around sending messages and also my scale issues, right? But outside of that, you pretty much can figure out just by reading the docs how people are, what they're doing, right? But no, I'm sure there are a couple people that might have open sourced some things around that, but I haven't really run into it, nor really have I searched for it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, have people been extending upon them?
Yeah, you have extension. Something built on your.
So the question was, are there extensions where people are building upon them?
Or
Or
plugins.
plugins? I can't think of any I mean, there are SDKs that they extend, but in terms
Right.
of, I say they, I mean eBay. I don't work for eBay, but yeah. I mean, is that really, what are you looking for in terms of what's your question getting at?
I think as a Scratch developer, there's a learning curve.
Okay. Yeah, it's not as hard as you think it is, actually, just so you know. I mean, I'm a pretty seasoned developer, but even then I look back at what it takes to build some of these things. It's not much. Right? For a basic, you saw the calls. You can actually take a look at that console, the testing console Reika was going through, and you see the anatomy of a call, right? It's just a matter of extracting that. So XML or JSON parsers, kind of that's as far as it goes in terms of payload disassembling, right? Any other questions? I think we're almost out of time. We're at 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from Twitter? Okay. All right. One last question here.
Before you mentioned before you go live that you went through the checklist.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like kind of what you were talking about with best practices around encrypting things and doing some other things like that. Is there actually like the best practices separated from the checklist, doing some of this type of stuff?
So the question is, is there a best practices guide, as in contrast to, or maybe that coincides with the compatibility checklist and all that? I don't know actually.
So if you go through the documentation, for each of the specific calls, we have best practices in terms of here's how you want to implement it, or here are the use cases that you want to use this call for. And supplementing that, we also have our knowledge base where you'll find a ton of information like code samples, or here's, for instance, if you wanted to do your order management, then here's the logic that you want to implement in your application. So there are multiple places where you'll find that information.
Yeah, that's the problem with the multiple places. So what I was thinking was, like you really mentioned something that was, like I think key is, like, don't do this because someone will hijack your code and kind of a problem.
Yeah.
So that's the type of best practice.
Sure. I think that you probably can find some security best practices. I think it's hard to kind of encapsulate it all into one document because there's so many aspects to running a production application, right? But before you deploy, I think it's just scale, security, efficiency. Just it's almost like the fundamentals. It's very like Warren Buffett, right? I mean, you just know you need to do it this way. So don't cut corners when it comes to production because particularly in this ecosystem, you don't want to mess up. Right? I mean, I outsourced my customer service to another company that went out of business, and I didn't know it. Right? I let my SSL, things expire. To Reika's point about revisiting every 6 months, make it even more frequent than that, because I've made that mistake. Right? And my ratings show it. Right? I mean, I'm just hammered because people are like, "Oh, this doesn't work internationally," and I'm like, "Whoops, I forgot to tell you that." Those things, right? I mean, there's a lot of things you need to do that just make sense. That even a guy like me, it just slips my mind. Yeah. One more. We'll just need one more question. Like a sample application that uses these things? Yeah, but probably won't. I'm sure I could maybe help. Let's go offline and I'll dig around the interwebs and we'll find one for you. All right?
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and I'm hoping that next year I'll have one of you guys here up with me on the stage.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Reika.